Hi, Alfred Lambremont Webre. Be very welcome to this interview and thank you for being accepting it for our new magazine, Reality, which is a French magazine, as you know, talking about real fiction. Yes? And which is all about real fiction, of course. Would you have the kindness, please, Alfred, to introduce yourself?
Yes, well, thank you. First of all, I'm very happy to be with you, and we'll be doing an interview first in English, and then we'll be doing an interview in French, and beg I'll beg the indulgence of your audience during the French interview.
Same for me now, Alfred.
and and my name is Alfred Weber, and I'm a futurist, and Um, in 1999, I wrote a book called Exopolitics. And exopolitics is the science of relations among intelligent civilizations in the multiverse. And this book actually launched the science of exopolitics. And it was published first online in the year 2000. And since the year 2000, there has been truly a shift in the paradigm on the planet. There are now over 50 or so governments that have begun to release their secret UFO and extraterrestrial files. And we have exopolitics organizations in over 50 countries around the world. And there's a whole paradigm shift to where if you look at the public opinion polls in countries, uh, you know, over 50% of the residents of major Western countries believe that the universe is populated, that there are other intelligent species in the universe, and that uh, a large percentage believe that the Earth is being visited now. And in one recent poll of North Americans, they believe that if the government announced officially that there were extraterrestrials, it would not surprise them at all, and it would be congruent with their beliefs, with their religious beliefs, or with their beliefs about about reality. Now, to show you how complex our reality, in fact, has become, my book was then again republished in 2005 as a paperback book, mass market, oversized paperback book, and called Exopolitics: Politics, Government, and Law in the Universe. And that book was taken by secret Tesla based time travel and was time traveled by DARPA, the US Defense Department, and the US CIA, Project Pegasus, back in time to 1971, where it was viewed by at least three independent witnesses, one of whom is my colleague Andrew D. Bishago, who was a childhood participant in the Project Pegasus, the U.S. secret time-space program. So that what I was writing about in terms of the science of exopolitics, or relations among intelligent civilizations in the multiverse, was actually time traveled back in time to 1971, where it was distributed in amongst the military intelligence community of the United States. And in 1971, they set up a meeting with me in which I was driven down almost to Washington, D.C. I thought I was meeting with environmentalists because I was a government official, a general counsel of the Environmental Protection Administration of New York City at the time. And I thought I was meeting with 50 environmentalists. In fact, I was meeting with 50 men in suits and ties, and they were 50 employees of the CIA and the Department of Defense who had a book that I would write in 1999 and be published in 2005, more than 30 years in the future, and they wanted to see what I was like then. Now, I knew that through cognitive dissonance that there was something wrong there, so I just gave my standard speech, but I knew that they were spooks or spies, so I just kind of talked to them and gave a standard talk about environmental protection. So I can verify that what Andrew Bashago has said from my eyewitness testimony, that what I witnessed is most congruent with the fact that they had time traveled that back. So then that's how the science of exopolitics in the formal sense got started, and why there's almost double or triple layers of the human understanding of the extraterrestrial presence, and that's because it's been largely hidden, both in terms of the extraterrestrials themselves and also in terms of the terrestrial powers and governments who, starting in 1953, in 1952, there was a flyover of the U.S. Capitol by interdimensional unidentified flying objects, or interdimensional extraterrestrial UFOs that came in and created their own interdimensional portals and came out over the U.S. Capitol, and those pictures were carried on the front page of newspapers throughout the world. And so shortly thereafter, in 1953, the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency held the Robertson panel and issued the Durant Report, which essentially required that ridicule accompany any mention of extraterrestrial life or UFOs in any science, in any discussion in education, in government, in media, so that there could be no public discussion whatsoever of the extraterrestrial presence and of UFOs. And humanity then was required to go back to the view of the Middle Ages, and that is that we're the only life-bearing planet in all of the multiverse, which is an absurdity because there are billions on billions of galaxies in this universe alone, and we don't know how many parallel universes there are to our universe. And this was legislated by the Central Intelligence Agency for various reasons. One of the reasons is that they are essentially the power arm of the world plutocratic elite. And the world plutocratic elite, which owns most of the world's wealth. We have families like one of the wealthiest families in what we can call the Illuminati, City of London, uh, bloodline bankers is worth $250 trillion. And this is documented while we have children are starving. And, most of the people in around the world are being either in poverty or being impoverished. And this is all because of a cult called the Illuminati, which are essentially 13 or so bloodlines, which are satanic and are ruling the world based on satanic principles and cutting humanity off from what we can call universe governance, which is based on divine principles or the government of God or of Source. Now, it takes a long time for science and spirituality to integrate themselves, but this is what's happening in this era. And one of the books that I'm working on now, which will be out in a few years, is called Dimensions, the Ecology of the Multiverse. And what we learn there, for example, is that intelligence and intelligent civilizations in the multiverse interact in an ecology of dimensions, starting with what we can call the interlife or the afterlife dimensions, which is where the intelligent dimension of souls live and resides in the interlife between lives. And souls enter, say, this dimension, this third time-space dimension that we're in, through interdimensional portals in which they will be enmeshed with and embedded inside their spacesuits that we call our bodies. So you're in your spacesuit of Frederick, and I'm in my spacesuit of Alfred, and we're inside a multiverse which has been designed. We know now that this universe that we're in is a time-space hologram, which is an artificial machine. It's a virtual reality, which has been designed by a higher intelligence for purposes of development of souls, for our souls to gain moral experience and development, and also to learn all of the values, because we are developing ourselves into souls or gods that in turn will be able to create universes on our own. So we're in the era where science and spirituality are coming together. What was formerly a matter of religious belief is now coming together. And part of the mission of Exopolitics in this dimension of Earth, which is now at this historical moment very conflict-ridden, we find it war, disease, crime, and poverty. That's a result because we have been a very targeted planet and dimension by a series of predatory extraterrestrial civilizations. There is one called the Anunnaki, which landed on Earth about 280,000 years ago. And they landed here to exploit our gold. We were able to visit their landing spot in South Africa called Adam's Calendar. And they continue to export the gold from our planet to their planet, which they need for various reasons, including a cover for their atmosphere. But
Mhm.
they dumbed down the human species, which was designed originally as a 12-strand DNA species. We were essentially 12-strand DNA light beings in the third dimension. And they dumbed us down to 2-strand DNA to be a wage slave species. And they established bloodlines of rulers. And that's what rules to this day in terms of the Merovingian bloodlines, the kings and queens, the Queen of England that owns 26% of the planet, that owns the uranium, that own all the gold mines, which are the City of London bloodlines down to the Rothschilds. All of these are the remnants of the Anunnaki ETs. Then there's a layer of the Draco reptilians and the Orion Greys, who have attempted a predatory takeover of this quadrant of the galaxy. There's a U.S. intelligence report in 1964 that estimated that the Draco reptilians and the Orion Greys had timelined Earth, Mars, and its moons for takeover between the year 2000 and the year 2050. Well, this has been given rise of a tremendous, almost a Star Wars conflict in this quadrant of the solar system, because the Draco reptilians and the Orion Greys are fourth dimensional, and we're a third dimensional species currently since then. And the Orion Greys made treaties as fronts for the Draco reptilians back in the 30s with the Roosevelt administration, the US government, and with the Nazi government. And that came through to the New World Order, which is kind of the rollout of the Draco reptilian and Orion Grey takeover of the planet in league with the Illuminati, that are using as one of their principal takeover methods um, uh, satanic Judaism through the Torah and through the Kabbalah, and now have infiltrated most of the Western nations, including France through the Rothschild, the European Union. Uh, the United States is mainly a Zionist nation, as is Canada. We have a Prime Minister, Harper, who's a Zionist, who just broke relations with Iran on orders from the Zionists. So all of this is actually an exopolitical Star Wars that is under the control of the Draco reptilians and the Greys. So on the opposite side of this kind of dialectic, we have uh, uh, the the what I would call the human forces that are working with the upper dimensional human forces from the Pleiades, from Alpha Centauri, from Sirius, who were the consortium of forces that created Homo sapiens in the first place, and who created us as a 12-strand DNA human. And we're now in, the era of the apocalypse, and apocalypse means revelation. So all of these facts that have been heretofore hidden are actually coming out. And the New World Order, reptilian Greys, Illuminati, are trying to implement a catastrophic timeline. So they are trying to implement World War III, a world police state, a domestic police state in each country. They use false flags like 9/11, Fukushima, depopulation through World radiation, through GMO foods, through heart that interferes with the human soul, connecting to source through its crown chakra, and through having hollowed out and essentially having clones or soulless Zionists as political leaders. And so on the other side, we now have a grassroots resistance of the population, the majority of the population of the planet, that has source-connected souls. And we are essentially understand that the planet is on a positive timeline. And so we are not allowing the planet to go into World War III, preventing GMO foods, preventing the world domestic police state by bringing these facts to light with an exopolitical understanding, and by having uh, 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 by implementing public policies like the abolition of the Federal Reserve Bank, which was established in 1913 through a conspiracy by the Rothschild family, which essentially made all the banks in the world and all the US dollars property of the Rothschild family. And so we're waking up the US public to this, and all of the world population through the internet, through magazines and programs like yours, and and to the dangers of the nuclear energy, which is, again, the uranium is owned by the Rothschilds, and in connection with the British Crown, the Queen of England, that owns the uranium in Canada and Australia, that are the major uranium suppliers. And these power plants are like a low-level nuclear bombing of the people of France. And all of the French wineries are actually low-level radiation, which is depopulating the French people. So these are some of the things that exopolitics, which you might think, oh, that's relations among civilizations in the multiverse. Yes, it is. So this is the understandings that we come to when we come to see what happens when predatory races like the Orion Greys and the Draco Reptilians attempt to take over a planet and come in league with the Zionist blood-like bankers like the Rothschilds and like the monarchs, like the monarchs of the Netherlands and of England, that own a great deal and control of the great deal's landmass and wealth, and are using it for this for these depopulation and occupation purposes of the Greys and the reptilians. So we're part of what we call the human civil defense forces that are engaged in this. We also have an education function through our university that's called Exo University, that you can find at www.exouniversity.org, where we provide education in exosciences, sciences, and exopolitics. Now, exosciences are the new 21st century sciences that provide insight into quantum access, access into the energy of the time-space hologram, where the energy of teleportation can become the prime transport technology for the planet. Right now, it's fossil fuel that is a prime transport technology, and that's a technology that's over 100 years old. and it's polluting the planet, and it's a tremendous land user and a causer of wars. And all of those fit into the Illuminati plans, because for them, war is an industrial activity. And so that trains, buses, airplanes, cars, trucks, and highways and railroads all take up a tremendous amount of land use, and they're what kills cities. Jane Jacobs, the urban thinker and planner, recognized that railroad yards and urban overpasses and superhighways, they take up a tremendous amount of the land use, and they kill human settlements and cities. And so the United States government has had secretly for 40 years now teleportation. And so part of our effort through Project Pegasus and through Exo University Education is to show that teleportation through a fraction of the energy that is used in fossil fuels, trucks, buses, cars, airplanes, ships, can be used in teleportation, uses just a fraction of the energy. You would have, from the New York teleport to the Paris teleport, would take you a matter of 10 seconds. You would get there with your family and with all of your luggage. And this is now technologically feasible. It's within the black budget world, so they've only designed it to get troops to the battlefield in war. But part of our effort is to make this public. And my colleague Andy Bashago, who was in Project Pegasus as a childhood participant, is running for US president in 2016 on a platform of making this technology public, so that it's the end of the fossil fuel era, it's the end of the nuclear power era, both of which have just been used to make the Illuminati Zionist bloodline bankers rich, to pollute the earth and to cause fossil fuel wars, and to have inappropriate land use through all of the highways and railroad yards. So with 2012, we're closing the chapter on the old. It's out with the Illuminati. They're old, they've been exposed, they've had their time, they're gone. In with teleportation, in with a 21st century view of near instant, sustainable transportation. And Andy Bashago, as a childhood participant, has teleported to, part of his job was to go to DARPA Forward Time Base in the year 2045, and to get time scrolls from there back to the present, so that they would know what was happening between then and the year 2045. And teleportation is a common feature then, so the future exists then, and so we're now looking forward to the implementation of teleportation worldwide by 2020. So these are the sorts of things that is the platform that an exopolitical understanding of the world really permits. Now, we've gone about 30 minutes, and I've given you kind of a capsule summary of what exopolitics is, of the factors that are trying to take us down a catastrophic timeline, and how through quantum access technologies like teleportation we create the positive timeline. So I'm going to turn it back over to you for questions.
Thank you for this complete presentation. Well, Fred, now what we are wondering, and it's interesting for our readers, for a real film magazine. When and what made everything change in your life? I explain myself if you don't mind. You have a so-called normal life. You make a brilliant study in a very famous university, okay, which is Harvard, I think. You have your degree, and you become a judge in Vancouver, in Canada, yes, at home. And, and suddenly you write a book in 1974, with another person, yes. You co-write a book and you talk about extraterrestrial life, everything. What happened? What is the point will make your life this one, which is
Yeah,
this one today?
yeah, that's a very interesting question, at least for me, because toward the end of 1972, I was in uh, New York City government as the general counsel of the Environmental Protection Administration. And I realized that the so-called matrix science, the positivist paradigm, the three-dimensional paradigm was just not functional. It was not providing uh, the answers. And I began to read books like Psychic Discoveries Behind the Iron Curtain by Ostrander and Schroeder, and Morning of the Magicians, which I think was by a French author. And I saw, what what the evidence was for a multi-dimensional paradigm of reality. And so I asked I asked around, and I wanted to be introduced to scientists who were working in this area, and I met a professor of experimental psychology who was also an expert in parapsychology and extraterrestrial studies at the beginning of 1973. And we began to collaborate, which resulted in my first book in that was written in June of 1973. And in February of 1973, but by that time, at the beginning of 1973, Mayor John Lindsay, who was uh, decided to run for president. He was the mayor of New York, and I worked for the government of New York. And he decided to run for president of the United States, and I didn't want to go that way. So I I decided really I wanted to explore this new paradigm that I was discovering, and so I left my job as in the government of New York at the beginning of 1973, and began with with the professor, with the scientist, to explore the new paradigm from the public policy point of view, which is kind of my background as an international lawyer, as an environmentalist. And one night, I was in. We then lived in a loft in Lower Manhattan in the Soho district that my then wife, who was an architect, she was an architect from Peru, had designed into a multi-level futurist thing. It had been featured in New York Magazine, and my our young son was only 2 years old. He was asleep in the back of the loft in his room back there, and I was in the front of the loft in my studio. And at midnight, this I had an interdimensional experience with a higher intelligence, and that higher intelligence, it came down around me, and I was almost inside of it, and we communicated telepathically for the course of almost 8 hours. I had one of those missing time experiences, and I was shown a movie of the future, and I
Yeah.
was shown uh, the Earth, almost at this time, the Earth going into, lots of difficulties. And I was shown how I would be able to come forth with some solutions and be helpful in that way. So since 1973, I've lived with that kind of insight, and that has really been something that has helped me. Both the insights that I gained during that experience, and that has helped me kind of move forward uh, along this positive timeline path. I think it set me on a positive timeline to be in contact with that higher intelligence. Now, I've long pondered what that higher intelligence is, and I'm now writing uh, my autobiography. It'll be out later in 2013. It's called The Worldwide Weber, and
WWW.
yeah, it'll be in that. I'll include a lot of analysis and a description of that and who I think that intelligence was.
Hmm. Okay, interesting, very interesting. Okay, Alfred. Now, I'd like to ask, what do you think? No, before, just excuse me. I think, is that correct? If I say all your work, or is all about justice in a way, in a
Yeah,
certain way.
yeah. There's a lot. I was trained as in international law.
Yeah?
I've taken many. I also learned African tribal law, and I'm a judge now in the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal.
I
I
don't know.
was, yeah,
It's all about another question.
yeah, and if you take my initials are ALW, if you turn them around, it spells LAW, which means law. So I think it's what Jung would call synchronicity,
I,
and
I
and
was right.
so part of what I'm concerned about is really the issue of justice, and it really concerns me now because the Illuminati cult that has hijacked the world has really hijacked the system of justice and government. I mean, and I've experienced this firsthand when I brought lawsuits in the 1980s, a series of 26 complex lawsuits in the 1980s for a particular client in the courts of Canada and the U.S. And I sued everybody up to David Rockefeller, George H.W. Bush Sr., the then Prime Minister of Canada, Brian Mulroney. I won a $750 million default judgment for my client in the courts of Ontario. It was overturned later in an illegal proceeding, and the courts are entirely controlled by the Masons, which are a creation of the Zionist Illuminati conspiracy. So they've eliminated justice. And in my conversations this past week in the United States with activists against smart meters and against HARP and chemtrails, they say that the courts are completely lawless, and there's no law anymore, and that's a strategy of the Zionist conspiracy. And by Zionist, I mean these bloodlines that misuse the Talmud and the Kabbalah, and that are Satanists, and that are in league with bloodline bankers and with the monarchies. We've identified them very, very succinctly, so I can speak in great detail. Um, and so and they're in league with the Draco reptilians and the Orion Greys from an exopolitical standpoint. So, and we at the Kuala Lumpur War Crimes Tribunal, we found George W. Bush and Tony Blair guilty of war crimes, and crimes against humanity for their 2003 invasion of Iraq, in which 1.5 million innocent Iraqi women and children, civilians, were killed, were murdered. And this is all part of the bloodlust of the Illuminati cult, which are diabolical. So make no bones about it. We've laid out a platform of the abolition of the wealth of these of the Rothschild family, which is $250 trillion. These are ill-gotten gains, that no more of these wealth centers should exist. The termination of these banks and fractional loan banking, that money should be a public utility like electricity and water. And if you want to start a business, you go and you get money like you get water. So you start a business. The redistribution of all of these trillions, it's been calculated that if these trillions are redistributed, every person on earth is a billionaire. You see, this was designed as a paradise planet until the Draco Reptilian, the Anunnaki, and the Orion Gray exopolitical intervention came in, and now the Illuminati and monarchical families are glomming on it. Well, tough luck, because the cosmic cops are here, and that's us.
Okay, Fred, you were just speaking about the war in Iraq, okay? And what do you know, and what do you think about the facts? The American army and allies, of course, but especially the American army, broke archaeological sites with bulldozers, which doesn't have nothing to do with petrol or war. What do you think of this fact?
I couldn't understand you because of the Skype. You said that the U.S. Army did something with an archaeological site. Now, where was that archaeological site?
In Iraq.
In Iraq, yes. Well, we know a great deal about that, and that's a scam, because we were told, in fact, there was a so-called scholar by the name of Zecharia Sitchin, who is now passed over, and he had promoted a series of translations of the Anunnaki. Well, we were approached by a close business associate of his, who had actually commissioned independent translators of his works, and that those independent translators determined that all of his translations were in fact fraudulent, and some of the books that he said existed did not exist, and that the picture that he was promoted about the Anunnaki was in fact false, and I verified this online with independent scholars that online have verified the same thing about Zecharia Sitchin. Now, Zecharia Sitchin became a secret consultant to the U.S. Department of Defense in the invasion of Iraq, and was advising them on the basis of his translations, which were fraudulent, that there were interdimensional portals in Iraq that the Anunnaki gods had, and that was and he was there and was advising the U.S. Army to invade Iraq and to command and capture these portals and other items which were interdimensional tools, and all of that was fraudulent. And then one night, under the influence of alcohol, he confessed to my source that he was part of the international Zionist agenda, and that they were doing it for this. And not only that, you have the testimony of Arizona Wilder and others that Zecharia Sitchin engaged in sexual orgies with the monarch sexual slaves of the Illuminati and the Bilderberger Club. So that's what's behind all of that, and why the U.S. Army desecrated the archaeological sites. That's because of the plan of the Zionist, Satanist, Illuminati network, the cult that hijacked the world based on satanic cults that have used the Talmud and the Kabbalah as satanic gateways, and that's well documented in the works of the author Henry Mackal of Canada.
Okay, Fred. Well, they were.
I'm just going to. This is the year of the truth, of the apocalypse, so we have to tell it like it is. And France is a center of Zionist domination under Lord Rothschild, and that's why you have so many nuclear power plants there. And here in we won't drink French wine here because it's radiated, because it's full of radiation. It's true.
No, I'm just laughing. Okay.
Okay.
It's a pity in a way, Alfred, because French wine is quite good sometimes.
I understand, but my job is to warn the French people of the
Yeah.
hazards that are there in France. Now, they have made your traditions like French wine. They have desecrated them through radiation, and it's the Rothschilds and the Queen of England and the Zionist families that are doing it. So I've got to tell the truth.
Okay. Alfred, something else now, if you like. You were speaking in your own presentation a few minutes ago. You spoke about the Mars Gate, yes, and about Bashego, your colleague Bashego, and the alternative for, yes,
Yes.
and so do you think? I mean, you have heard about this Dutch businessman who is setting up really a reality TV show, about people who are going to live in Mars, on Mars, excuse me, on the planet Mars.
Yeah.
Maybe in 10, 15, 20 years. And do you think the occult elite, what you call the Illuminati or whatever, has already planned everything long time ago?
Oh, yeah. In fact, author Widener talks about alternative 3, which is where the bases on Mars were part of a long-term plan of the Illuminati going back to the late 1700s, and that in fact the second chapter of the Illuminati was founded at my university, Yale University, in 1776 under the name Skull and Bones. The cover story was that it was founded in 1832 as a Brotherhood of Death, but the real story is that it was founded in 1776 as a second chapter of the Illuminati. And their mission was to form a second survival colony called Alternative 3 on Mars because Earth was supposed to be destroyed in 2012. Well, the problem is that they aren't going to get their catastrophic timeline off. They won't be able to materialize it into 2012 or 2013 because we've changed timelines thanks to the intervention of the upper dimensional enlightened intelligent civilizations and source in the multiverse. So that plan is being thwarted. But there has also been a very intense secret war going on with regard to Earth and Mars, because part of the attempted occupation of Earth and Mars and of Earth by the Orion Greys and the Draco Reptilians, who wanted to occupy Earth and Mars sometime between 2000 and 2050. There's been a fierce battle for occupation of Mars and of Earth. And excuse me, what happened was that starting in 1952, after the overflight, in fact, it was Andrew Basiago's father, Raymond F. Basiago, that was enrolled to develop the ramjet engine that was necessary in the defense of Earth against the Orion Gray invasion. And then the human extraterrestrials linked, living underground on Mars, then linked up with the humans on Earth, and that's where his father and Andrew Basiago in 1971 met with 3 Martian astronauts from Mars in a U.S. U.S. defense airfield in New Jersey, when the Mars people were there on a technical defense liaison, because they had established a defense cordon for the common defense of Mars and Earth by the humans against the reptilians and Greys. It's only been the Illuminati, the Zionist bloodline bankers, and the monarchs and certain other bloodlines that have been in league with the reptilians and the Greys, that have established Nazism and the New World Order now, and Zionism, and have taken over Europe and France and the United States and Canada and Israel, that have been in league with the Greys and the reptilians. The rest of humanity, the rest of us humans with normal human souls, are resisting. And so that's my call today. It's a call for all humans to rise up and resist.
Okay. Okay. I was wondering, Fred, you surely know that after black operations, yes, most of the witnesses have fragmented personalities. You're aware of that? Well,
After what? What was that word? After what?
after black ops.
Oh, black ops. Okay.
Okay, excuse me. my English. Black operations. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So witnesses have most of the time fragmented personalities.
Yeah.
So
Well,
yourself, Alfred.
that's after trauma-based mind control. Trauma-based mind control.
For example, what are your methods of overlap? Overlap. How can you, how and when, how do you do to trust people that you interview, for example?
Oh, i.e., trauma-based mind control can create various personalities within a single individual. So a person that's been through trauma-based mind control, how do we trust them as a subject? That's your question. And that's a very good question, because that's a question that those of us who are in the field that deal with super soldier, that deal with whistleblowers, Whistleblowers are individuals who have been in the national security state who come forward. And many of these whistleblowers have been subject to trauma-based torture to try and wipe their memories. So how do you trust them? So that's an excellent question, and that's the real question of exopolitical research. And the answer has many levels. So I'll explain some of the levels.
Yes.
Yeah. First of all, one of my degrees is as a psychotherapist. I have a graduate psychotherapy degree from the University of Texas. So we were trained in what's called active listening, and it's establishing an I-thou relationship with the whistleblower. You have to be real. It's a real relationship. You have to be it's a soul to soul relationship. That's what you're developing. And so that's number one. It's real. It's not, artificial. And so many people, many researchers and investigators in the UFO field, I'm not going to name names, but they're out there, treat contactees as objects. And in fact, we were just at a conference where one was overheard at this reception, was overheard saying, "Oh, all these people in here," referring to contactees, "are, quote, damaged goods." And this is a person who's a major researcher in the field, and he treats these people as objects. He treats them as damaged goods, and because he has no training as a psychotherapist and no training in as in no training in the science of the mind, which is crucial here. So that's number one. Secondly, there are all sorts of techniques and technologies that the individual whistleblower, be they a super soldier, be they someone who's been a chrononaut, can use to deprogram themselves from whatever trauma-based mind control or drug-based memory erasure has happened to them, or even traumatic experiences that they've experienced on the surface of a planet, say like Mars, that has really experienced, has really traumatized them for life. And these range from simple things as EMDR, rapid eye movement, desensitization, with the trained therapist. This can begin to get down to the original trauma and begin to dissolve it. There are more rigorous methods that, for example, the wife of Michael Relf, who is a former U.S. serviceman, a U.S. chrononaut, a time traveler, who spent 20 years on the surface of Mars, has used to deprogram.
Excuse me, Alfred. Excuse me. What do you exactly mean? Could you say what you exactly mean with chrononaut?
Yes.
Please.
Yeah. An astronaut travels among the stars. A chrononaut is a time traveler. Chronos is time in Greek, and nautikos is traveler in Greek. So chrononaut is time traveler. Okay.
Okay.
So Michael Relf, who's a former U.S. chrononaut, his wife, has been able to recover his memories through the use of various technologies and techniques, which are described in the 2 books that she has written, which are available at his website and which also are available at exopolitics.com for free. You just download them. And there are others. So these are technologies that can be used.
So
Thank
now
you.
the interview is finished in English, at least.
Thank you very much.
Uh,
It's been a great pleasure being with you,